A body lay among the rock pools. Lucy froze, one hand clutching her beach bag, the other halfway through wiping strands of hair out of her eyes. She stared at the shape. The bluff offered a good view of the rock-dotted beach and the dark rolling ocean. When she had left her hotel that morning, it had been a clear spring day. Blue skies, fluffy clouds, and a warm breeze had encouraged her to keep her plans for a visit to the beach, even though the cafe waitress had warned bad weather was coming. Dark clouds had begun to gather not long after Lucy left the town. She hadn't realised just how remote the beach was. She lived in Sydney, where a hot day meant every sandy cove was packed with sunbathers and families, but this was New Zealand, and a good way out from the touristy areas. The beach looked as though it almost never saw human intervention. She'd even passed a group of seals happily sunning themselves on the rocks a few kilometres back. Maybe that's what the shape is. A seal. Sailors used to mistake them for mermaids, didn't they? Lucy squinted at the shape. Definitely human. There were no flippers or oily skin, but two arms dragged through the rock pools as the waves nudged at the figure. Lucy turned to the path that led to the town, but hesitated. The walk back would take more than an hour. Thick clouds were already turning the sky's cornflower blue into grey as the storm swelled. The body rocked in a mesmerising cycle as the water lapped around it. She didn't think it had caught on any rocks. If the tide pulled it out, it would be lost again, possibly forever. I can't let that happen. The incline leading to the rocky shore was steep, and Lucy tightened her grip on her bag before sitting on the edge of the grassy overhang and swinging her feet over the edge. She slid down the slope, regained her feet, and jogged towards the shape swaying in the water. It was wearing dark blue clothes, some sort of uniform, Lucy thought, though the fabric was tattered from being snagged in the rocky surf. He might have fallen from one of the freighters that circled the islands, or possibly even a cruise ship. As Lucy moved closer, the intense smell hit her, making her stomach muscles clench and her throat restrict. She tried to breathe through her mouth, but the odour became stuck on her tongue. Under the torn clothes, his skin was bubbling, swelling, as bacteria worked on converting the flesh into gas. He lay face down in the water, so she couldn't see his expression, but his scalp had lost a lot of its hair. Get him onto the beach, get him secured, then go for help. Lucy knelt beside the body. The smell made her retch, and she pressed her right sleeve over her nose as she reached her spare hand towards the corpse. Thunder cracked overhead. It was close. So close that she knew she would certainly get drenched on the walk back to town. Squeezing her eyes until they were nearly closed, Lucy touched the corpse's shoulder. The cloth, cold and wet, felt slimy under her fingers. She wanted to move back and to look away, but she didn't allow herself. Instead, she tightened her grip on the jacket and pulled. The body was heavier than she had expected. Its clothes caught in the rocks, and its head lolled, spilling water out of its open mouth and the holes pocking its skin. With the water came more of the smell. She had never thought a decaying human could be so overwhelming. Lucy gagged as she pulled the figure out of the water and dragged it further up the beach. She didn't let herself stop until she had reached the curve where the beach rose into the bluff, and then she let go and stepped back with a gasp of relief. The body was missing a leg. Lucy's heart dropped. She glanced at the water's edge where the limb floated half submerged in the sea-foamed rock pool. I can't just leave it there. Lucy approached the leg. The pants had stayed with the body, leaving the limb exposed. It looked ghastly, grey, bubbling, and eaten away in many sections where sea creatures had feasted. Touching the flesh was abhorrent. It was slimy and spongy, with just enough of the familiar fleshy texture to re-trigger Lucy's gag reflex. She carried it up the beach as quickly as she could and left it beside the body. Another crack of thunder deafened her as the sky lit up. Lucy turned to the ocean where the waves were rolling closer, growing in size and breaking on the bank of rocks near the shore. A huge, heavy raindrop hit her face. The waves would sweep into the cove as the storm grew. If the police decided to wait until after the storm, the body might be washed away by the time they reached the beach. Lucy stared at the waterlogged corpse. It had been a person who might have a family and who deserves a proper funeral. I can't let him be lost again. She searched along the shore for rocks. Most of them were too large to lift, but she found half a dozen small stones which she wedged around the corpse to weigh it down. Will that be enough? What if it's not? I should find something to bring back for the police to identify the body at least. Lucy knelt beside the figure and held her breath while she searched the uniform's pockets. If he'd been carrying a wallet, it had been lost to the ocean. As she felt around the jacket, something else came loose, and Lucy stared at it for a moment before deciding, that'll have to do. She tugged the item free, then stepped away from the body, stifling her gag reflex. Lucy carefully placed her prize into the beach bag. This way, even if the body's gone by the time they find the beach, they'll have something to identify, something to bury. The rain had started to fall in earnest. With a final glance at the body, Lucy scrambled up the slope. She reached the path at the top, wiped her wet hair out of her face, and began the long walk back to town, the corpse's head tucked snugly in her beach bag.